In this episode, we will be looking at one of the most famous mental institutions of its time. Known for its beautiful architecture and unorthodox treatments, today's topic is Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital was built in 1874 in Danvers, Massachusetts, a town previously known as Salem Village. The hospital itself was built on Hathorne Hill, where Salem witch trial judge John Hathorne had previously lived. The daily life of a patient at Danvers, much like a patient at any mental hospital, is dreary. The hospital itself was designed to have a pleasant, nurturing appeal. The interior and exterior were ornate with private rooms, long hallways, and beautiful decoration. Men's rooms are on the west side of the hospital, and women's on the east. However, Danvers experienced extreme crowding and placed many patients in the basement or attic. Instead of 600 patients the building was meant to hold, Danvers housed around 2,360. A report found in 1901 stated that not all patients of Danvers were really mentally ill. In fact, due to the lack of requirements for admittance, 9.2% of patients were elderly folks who went to Danvers simply because they had no home. The overpopulation is where life at Danvers began to go south. The hospital didn't have enough funding to hire any workers than those needed to care for a population of 600. This left many patients virtually uncared for, which caused most of the population of Danvers to be sick and dirty. The issue was so bad that some patients would die unnoticed. Workers would find them days later rotting away in a forgotten room. The need to control patients led to drastic measures, and thus the nightmarish elements that Danvers is known for were born. Treatment methods like straitjackets, solitary confinement, and electroshock therapy were introduced. Although originally used to treat patients, staff resorted to them as punishment for patients that caused trouble. Hydrotherapy was introduced in the 1930s. Doctors at Danvers believed that heavily restraining a patient and holding them in water would cleanse the body and the mind. Overuse of drugs and insulin comas made patients function much slower than normal. Some drugs also caused patients' faces to twist into permanent, disturbing forms. However, the most popular form of treatment by far was the lobotomy. This is a surgical incision into the frontal lobe of the brain to sever one or more nerve tracts. Doctors would deliver a lobotomy for anything from nightmares to backaches. The majority of patients experienced very negative effects. Visitors often described patients as vacant, blankly staring at walls and wandering aimlessly through hallways. A patient's first examination was mostly terror-free. They would be bathed and any physical injuries were documented. A mental evaluation was given to further determine which ward the patient would be housed in. Accurate records of family, health, and history were kept in the daily clinic starting in 1902. Patients were rarely ever granted time away from the hospital. Patients were also put to work collecting produce on Dodge Farm, with almost all income funding the hospital.
So, what was day-to-day life like at Danvers? Can you walk us through what a typical day was like for you?
Well, we'd get up in the morning and we'd have our breakfast in the dining hall. Then we'd have group therapy and we'd sit and talk about our experiences and try to help each other get through the hardships that we were working on at the institution. And then after that, we'd have individual therapy with our doctors that we had assigned to us alphabetically, and then we'd have free time for a couple hours, and then we'd get to go in the courtyard, which was really nice. We had a lot of space on the premises there at Danvers, or we could visit other people from other wards that were not as heavy with the security. And then after that, we'd go back inside, and it'd be bedtime. We'd take our pills and go to sleep. This is how it was for a little bit. And then everything started falling apart.
How do you feel you've improved since your stay at Danvers?
Well, to be honest with you, I really don't think that I have improved. Like, I went in and I was, out of my mind. And I feel like as much as putting on the meds helped, and that helped, me regulate my behavior, as soon as everything started getting too full, they stopped being able to provide meds for everybody, and things started getting worse again for me. Like, I started having the same dark thoughts that I had before, and I still have them now, and it's scary sometimes because I went in there and I'd hope they fix me, but here I am now.
Do you feel the treatment at Danvers helped anyone that was staying there?
I mean, it was weird because at first it seemed like everyone was getting better and improving, but then, like, one by one, my friends would get taken away, and they'd come back with these markings on their foreheads, and they'd act completely unlike themselves. They were emotionless, and just, they didn't care about anything, and the ones that I was friends with who enjoyed, like, art and music, they didn't have interest in it more. It was just like they were completely gone.
Well, what do you think happened to them?
I think that's when the doctors started doing the lobotomies. They go into the rooms and then they'd come back out and they'd be completely different.
His fame stems from a few different sources. The largest would be the prefrontal lobotomy, which is said to have been created by Danvers surgeons Walker Freeman and James Watts in the 1940s. The disturbing effects seen in patients is what gave Danvers its original terrifying reputation. The hospital also became the first Massachusetts mental hospital to hire a woman doctor in 1879. That's it for that part. Danvers is also the setting of 1958 horror movie Home Before Dark, and 2001 horror Session 9. In 2004, Danvers was featured as a setting in the thriller game Painkiller. These all contribute greatly to the nightmarish ideas that coincide with the hospital. In 2005, Danvers was turned into a luxury apartment building, with apartments opening in 2007. In 2006, all the buildings that were set for demolition had been torn down. But on Abilene and Danvers apartments opening day, a fire broke out that engulfed 4 buildings, with the source of the fire being unknown. All that remains of Danvers State Hospital to this day are a few underground tunnels, the shells of wings D and G, the cemeteries, the ruins of the administration building, and the chilling story of the famous institution. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Abandoned History.